Hi, I'm Todger with Northern Rifle Accurizing, and today we're going over the process of rebarreling a rifle from truing up the action to threading the barrel to fit the action and chambering it. So usually when we get a action or a rifle in, we would get a complete rifle, or if you're building from the ground up, we would get an action. But either way, the process is pretty much the same with truing up the action. What we would do is we'd start off by either taking the action and taking the current barrel off of it, or taking the action without the barrel and doing the same process. What we would do is we would true up the action first, and what that entails is making everything on the action concentric with the raceway of the receiver, which is where your bolt slides in and out of. And what that would do is we would, in the lathe, we would take the receiver and we will square up the face of the receiver, which means when you cut it, you're squaring up the face to the center line of the receiver. And then we would after that, we would take the threads. We would make sure they're concentric with the center line. And then we clean up the internal recoil lugs of the receiver, where your recoil lugs of your bolt mate when it cams. And when everything on the receiver's done, what we'll do is we'll clean up the face of the bolt to make sure that when it's in the receiver and cocked, it is square with the receiver. And when that's done, we will lap, which we take a lapping compound and we lap the recoil, the lugs of the bolt to the internal lug of the receiver. And at that point, your receiver's squared up. And this particular one is a Tikka T3X action, so it does not have a recoil lug, pinned or anything to the front of it. So a lot of times your recoil lug will determine, your threads, your thread shank length on a barrel. But on this particular one, we don't have to worry about that. So once we get this one trued up, what we'll do is we'll take a measurement from the face of the receiver to the face of the bolt, and from the face of the receiver to the nose of the bolt. And on this one, the difference is 120 thousandths. And that would end up being your headspace. But usually we like to put a clearance of about 13 thou. So when I chamber this barrel, the headspace will be at 0.133, or the cartridge will be sticking out the back of the barrel 0.133 inches. And at the same time, when we do that, when we measure from the face of the receiver to the nose of the bolt, which is the very most front part of the bolt, that will give us the dimension, and I'm going to subtract 13 thou from that as clearance, and that will determine the length of my tenon length, or the length of your threaded part of your barrel that fits your receiver. And once I get those measurements done, we put the barrel in the lathe. So we have a lathe right here. In here we have just a stock barrel blank. This is what we would get, right here, nothing on it, just like this. And we'll put it in this lathe or our other lathe. We have two of them. But regardless of how we do it, we always dial in your barrel from the center, the bore. So never measure off of the outside diameter of a barrel. You're always going off of the bore diameter or the ID of a barrel inside diameter. And on this particular lathe, what we have is this nice little fixture that we put in the lathe 4-jaw chuck, and we dial this fixture in so it's measuring 0 all the way around. And then we have a collet holder that holds an ER50 collet on this particular one, and it's meant just for a 1.25 inch barrel. So you'll slide your barrel into this, and we get it tight, and then there's a ball inside of here that rotates, and we have jack screws and tightening screws on here, so we can dial in off the face and the bore of this barrel to make sure it's square and concentric, and we're running right on the idea of the barrel. Now on another lathe, what we'd do is we'd chuck up the barrel in the chuck, and we have a spider on the back end of the lathe, and we'd make sure everything's running zero on both ends. Either way, it's the same process. We always dial off the center line of the bore. You have to. It's important. And then well, the first thing we do when we get a lathe in there and everything's dialed in, we'll cut off your barrel coin, kind of like a token. It doesn't work in a pop machine or anything, but it's just kind of a cool little thing to show you, what caliber, what twist rate, everything, and what brand of barrel it was. And then from there, we would cut our diameter, cut our major diameter of our threads. We'll cut the length of the tenon that we determine based off of the receiver, and we would cut our relief groove, and we'd cut our threads, and we'd keep cutting our threads until the receiver fits this barrel. And then when that's done, we will take whatever caliber we're chambering it for. This one happens to be a 22 caliber barrel, 8 twist, and we're going to chamber it in 22 nozzler. So what we would do is we'd take our 22 nozzler reamer, and we would slowly take cuts into it and clean it out, and use a lot of oil and make sure we have a nice clean chamber at all times, blowing chips off, wiping chips off, getting in there until we're close to our headspace, and we'd get our gauges out, and we'd take very minimal cuts until our headspace is a go. And how we do that is you cut your chamber until your go gauge from your headspace gauge will go in and your go gauge will not. And at the same time, we also use a piece of brass to make sure that goes in nice too, because you're not shooting a go or no go gauge out of it. You're shooting an actual cartridge that requires brass, so you got to make sure the actual brass works in it too. And when that's done, I will take like 600 grit emery cloth and a little wood dowel rod I made, and polish out the barrel and make sure there's no sharp edges or a nice radius where it feeds into the barrel, and it's nice and polished. And from there, I would take the barrel out of this, polish her up, and then I would cut it to length, and we'll do a 11-degree target crown on most barrels, or every barrel actually we do an 11-degree target crown, but then on a lot of barrels also we'll thread the muzzle for a brake or a suppressor or whatever you want. We can do any threads you want. This lathe here will do metric threads or standard threads, so we can pretty much chamber, and we have 100+ chamber reamers here too in various cartridges, so we can cut almost any thread you want or chamber almost any caliber you want. Alright, so what I'm doing is touching off now on the face of my barrel. And I'm setting my 0 on my DRO. I'm cheating a little bit by using the DRO, but you know what? It makes my job easier. So and what I'll do is I set it at 0, and I'll take a nice cleanup pass. Make a nice cleanup pass for my reference, and then from there I will start cutting the length of that I need for my tenon. And on this particular barrel, it needs to be 0.992 inches.